I was reflecting as Damien came up, as Terrence came up, as I was looking at my cousin Bobby, as his sister Rachel was talking. Thinking about how our city's turning back towards mandatory minimum sentences, and our governor wants to accelerate the trend. And how so much of that has been premised off of, one, this fallacy that it's just going to hurt black folks. You get right into people's thinking, these policies, the 80s, the 90s, these horrible policies. Then we wake up today, we don't just have the most incarcerated black or brown people on the planet, we have the most incarcerated white people on the planet too. Think about how easy it is for some folks to throw away Baltimore. Stereotype people. I don't know what the police see when they see me, or they see Bobby, or they see Terrence, or they see Damien. When I see Terrence, I see a man who works hard every day, who belongs to a union, who takes risks not just for his family, but for every family on this block and the blocks that surround him. Damien, I see a man who worked hard to get his MD and then decided that he had a better calling teaching high school. And went and taught the girls of Western High School for years. See Bobby, I see a man who works hard every day and is in court fighting for access to his daughter whenever some folks aren't cooperating. But here's the thing, you travel, as I have, across 20 counties now in Maryland, it's not just black men that get thrown away. You go to Cumberland, it's a film negative of everything you see in West Baltimore. Whatever you see here in black is there in white. Poverty, addiction, gangs, crack, anything bad. And you realize, you go to South Baltimore, and there's families that were abandoned by the factories just like ours were here. And you start to realize, in the last 3 years, we've seen violence skyrocket. We've seen deaths from ODs skyrocket. Had a week when the headline here was that one high school had buried 5 students in the last year. And then I'm sitting in a garden party in Talbot County talking to a little white girl telling me that she buried 3 of her classmates in the last year because they OD'd on pills. We have more, as Dr. Maya Angelou said, we have more in common than we have uncommon. The working families of Maryland have more in common than we have uncommon. Those of us who come from Baltimore, west, east, south, we carry memories, especially if we were alive in the 70s. We carry memories in our hearts when things weren't so bad. When old ladies washed marble steps every Saturday morning, and you could see young brothers singing on the street corner Friday night. When folks came home to blocks that hadn't been broken by poverty. You go to Cumberland, they tell the same stories. You go to Salisbury, they tell the same stories. The opportunity in this moment when it seems like every working family in our state shares the same anxiety, which is the fear that often the generation now growing into the basement, our children, our grandchildren, may be the first generation of Americans to be worse off educationally, economically, than those that came before. We have 2 choices in front of us. We can be divided against each other and get played, or we can come together and move forward. And I'm running for governor because I believe it's time for us to come together and move forward. My family, as you heard, moved here almost 80 years ago. My granddad, grandma came up from Petersburg. Granddad worked on the B&O Railroad. Mom and grandma moved into the McCullough Homes housing projects in West Baltimore with them. Generation later, my grandparents had become, respectively, granddad had gone from being a fourth cook in the B&O to being a probation officer. Grandma had gone from answering phones at Planned Parenthood to being a social worker. And they were waving goodbye to me at Dulles Airport as I flew off to Oxford, England to become a Rhodes Scholar. We know what it takes to go from raising one generation in the housing projects of West Baltimore to sending the next off to some of the greatest universities in the world. And what it takes, yes, is hard work, but it also takes a context in which hard work adds up easily. In which hard work is enough by itself, where you don't have to have an incredible amount of luck, not to come out of college in debt. A lot of luck to have a job that actually gives you health care. Or luck to not get pulled over that night by the cops. We also have to have an economy that's expanding, that's truly expanding. They tell us Maryland has a low rate of unemployment. But man, you travel through Baltimore, you travel through Cumberland, you travel through the counties across the state, down the eastern shore, you'll find plenty of pockets of persistent poverty. See, to be unemployed, you have to be looking for a job. And once you've become discouraged, once society has trained you that there's no job for you, you get counted as if you have a job. They take you out of the unemployment number. So you start talking about joblessness, let alone underemployment. Well, it's a very different story. We can do this. We can create a context, not just to make me governor. That's a means to an end. We can get back to the working families of our state, governing our state's priorities. But it means that we're going to have to build a social movement across the state to lift up our families. We can make sure that everyone has health care. We're the only state with a federal waiver that would allow you to do it. We should use it. We can make sure that no one's paid less than $15 per hour. I'm tired of sitting with mothers who tell me that what we need in our city is more police athletic league centers. Number one thing. And I say, why? And they say, well, because somebody has to be home with the kids. And you say, well, how many jobs are you working? And they say 2 or 3. Well, let's raise your wage. Whenever I get that request and that response, the person's making $10 per hour. Well, why don't we raise your wages and make it possible for you to work one less job? Because invariably they say that they want the PAL Center there so that somebody can watch these kids at night. Wouldn't it be better if you were working one less job and you were watching your kids at night? I'm all for rec centers, but not as a replacement for parents. We can end this era of massive student debt. The way my granddad became a probation officer is we ended segregation, great Baltimorean, Thurgood Marshall, and then he took 1 year at the University of Maryland School of Law, third class of black students admitted. And that was enough to go from being somebody else's servant, essentially, to being a probation officer. My grandmother was able to commute to the University of Pennsylvania School of Social Work from West Baltimore on the train because the state of Maryland paid for it because we didn't have a school of social work then. See, before there was mass incarceration, there was no massive student debt. So we can end massive student debt and pay for it by ending mass incarceration.
Yes,
Think about that for a second.
Yes,
Right? When I was co-chairing Bernie Sanders' campaign here in Maryland, and he was saying that public universities should be tuition free, people would say he was crazy. Nobody asked him why he was crazy. I said, Bernie, one day, why do you think public universities can be tuition free? He said, because they were when I was young. And that's why so many people I knew, families doing so much better today. And we can make sure that our schools, which we're seeing it's so painful to watch them cut counselors and teachers from our public schools in Baltimore right now. And what a linchpin, right? My family, all of it, one of the reasons why I love Damien for teaching at Western is so much of my family's prosperity is leveraged off the fact that my mom desegregated Western High School in 1955. Huge series of opportunities. Universities considered her that wouldn't have considered her, frankly, if she was going anywhere else. Still the best public high school in Baltimore. And we look across, and then, but what fed into that was the PS down the street from the housing projects she grew up in. Teachers loved her, and they were great teachers. And we can get back to a place where we have a great teacher in every classroom, in every school in Maryland. But it means we will have to pay teachers more. You can't start somebody out with $44,000 a year who has debt for graduate school and college and maybe raising kids themselves, and not expect them to leave for the first place that will pay better. And that's what they do. Down in Prince George's, they lose them to D.C. all day long because D.C. pays $20,000 per year more to start a teacher. And the way we're going to do that is this casino money and this lottery money that they've promised us for a generation now would be used to supplement the historic sources of public education. Well, guess what we're going to do? We're going to keep the promise the state made to the voters. We're going to make sure that it's used to supplement the historic sources of education. And they say, oh, but be careful, because the state's own consultants say, well, we're underfunding our students' education by up to $2.6 billion a year in this state. Well, when you do the math, that's like 6 or 7% of our state budget. And when you run a business, you've been a CEO as I have since you were 26 years old, one of the things you learn how to do when you're running a business, whether it's a flower shop or it's the NAACP or it's investment firm I run now, is you learn how to have tough conversations about priorities with love. And so sure, that money that we're spending on education, they're now spending on something else, and maybe we aren't going to be able to spend that money on something else. So you can't spend the same dollar on two things. But why would you short-circuit your children's education today and your state's economy tomorrow because you're afraid to have a conversation over about 6% of your state budget? It doesn't make any sense unless you imagine these children to be somebody else's kids. But we got to get back to reality because they are all our kids. We are all residents, citizens of Maryland, and they are all Maryland's children. Whether they're in Cumberland or they're in West Baltimore, they are all Maryland's children. Whether they're big counties or out on the Eastern Shore, they are all Maryland's children. And we're the grown-ups, and we have a responsibility when we have to have a tough conversation and figure it out. And we do that if we're really invested in the human capital of the state. It'll be that much easier for us to get our economy really humming again. See, Maryland is a place with multiple strengths that, frankly, we need to double down on. One is that we are a place that is known for technology solving the world's toughest problems, from cancer, Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland Medicine, to cybersecurity. And there's a lot more that can be done to grow, whether it's health sciences or it's cybersecurity, much more rapidly. But here's the other thing. Out in the Silicon Valley, they're under pressure right now. They say that they're projecting 1 million programmer shortage, in part because it's so expensive to live there. Not as many people want to move there as used to. And Jesse Jackson and everybody else have been wearing them out because less than 3% of their programmers are black. Well, in Maryland, almost 20% of our programmers are black. Prince George's County alone has 17 times more black programmers than Santa Clara County, where Facebook and Google are headquartered. And so, rather than just simply talking about recruiting government agencies from Virginia to Maryland like the FBI, to Prince George's, we should be talking about recruiting FB, recruiting Facebook, recruiting Google. They're building expansion campuses in Pittsburgh. Why can't they build one in Baltimore? Our families came here, whether we came here as immigrants from a different country or migrants from the South, our families came here because Baltimore and Maryland were a doorway to greater opportunity. And when we went through the uprisings, well, we were forced to look right in the mirror at what happens when we let those doorways shut and the gates rust and we make it harder for families to hold on to the American dream. We can do it. We can do it because it's been done before. We can make Maryland a place where it's easy for families to move up and out of poverty into prosperity and into a greater place to make a difference for generations to come. But it starts with us believing that we are enough, that our values are enough, that our genius is enough, that our ability to organize our neighbors is enough. See, you'll hear from several Democrats running for office this year. What makes this campaign different is two things. One, getting through this primary, we start off with a decided advantage. In my candidacy, I'm a former national president of the NAACP. I'm a former chair of Bernie's campaign in Maryland. Decided advantage in uniting working families across every line they say is supposed to keep us divided and not able to work, across race, across faith, across geography. And we will do that, and we will win this primary. When it comes to this general, the only way to beat Hogan is to turn out more voters. He's only in office because 125,000 likely Democratic voters did not show up, and he won by 63,000 votes. It does not matter how, they will keep telling you he is popular. It does not matter how popular a politician is. It only matters if more people will vote for him. He's a Republican running in the era of Donald Trump.
Yes, sir.
While some Democrats may have voted for him in 2010, I guarantee you no more than the ones who voted last year will vote for him.
That's right.
Will vote for him this time.
That's right.
And when you look at where those voters did not turn out in 2010, don't let somebody tell you it was because a black man was running for office and white folks wouldn't vote for him. Big percentages of those numbers were in Baltimore City and Prince George's County. We can decide, all of us together, who the next governor is. In this state that's 2-1 Democrats to Republicans with not that many independent voters, we have the votes to unseat Hogan right now. We simply have to decide to do it. Thank you for turning out this morning. Please stay involved with this campaign. It is August, or the very beginning of September. It's a Saturday on Labor Day weekend. I am so grateful that you showed up. But understand, it only gets easier to turn out folks from here. This is what the beginning of a movement looks like. This is what the beginning of Doug Wilder's campaign looked like in Virginia, of David Dinkins' campaign in New York that year, and Harold Washington. We're following their playbook. We will build a movement of working families, a rainbow coalition, a beloved community, people who believe, who know in their hearts what Maryland has been for our families, it can be again if we come together. Thank you, and God bless.